Hello, America, New York, Hartford. There are only about 350 streets in Hartford, Connecticut. In like 3 days, just for on one person, they've been charging like over $30,000 for forced mental evaluation, where and how I cut them rolls with various natures of organized crime. And then with people further with the principal child defenders campus. And they force that. They have the intelligence families, kids, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, foreign intelligence individually grouped in together. Where and how being having been used remotely by the breaching method, black pupils. They have left a hyper forensic trail that was used to use them remotely. So we'll see. Taller than the World Trade Center, but not. This is this hurt. This took away my life. The World Trade Center attack, too. In other words, not the fight with someone about something debatable, and you guys let the debatable get away with it. You have fake sides and exceptions as collusion, as arrays. Many pray. You cannot defend the litigation and the uses of the sides with this of all the side. The uses of that word. Every word is a word slash value. So New York City, we're gonna demonstrate. I'm not a lawyer, but we have black pupils, and our founders communicated to communicate other for themselves about the Constitution unabridged, and our founders are distinct from what the presidents are. See, now we have the experts on reason who are tactically delusions wrought and criminally foreign influence simultaneously. They've been attaching little kids since before our founders were born, north and south. They had way worse than witch trials in slavery with against the color black, so against everyone, black pupils. But they said, see how many police forms they have to be because of how this thing designed. The suburbs before our founders were born tactically denatured to cause negative value nature progressions, acts and natures, while making more and more the only means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts and natures to take part with criminal insidiousness natures of ones. And then our founders were born. This had already been stained, and the Native Americans are 1/3 of our founders. And I have to say that because each of the campuses, sickly distinctly, have been communicating other. And then so they value uses of their sense and sensibilities for defenses of the uses of the integrity by the branches of government. When were they not roles with predicate acts with facts? Well, and or with tactical delusions relative black pupils. So the suburbs were designed for the torture and for the extortion and for the fact cheap nature extortion of slavery of of George Washington and of James Madison differentially. Our first president, it's James Madison's plan, and then it's George Washington agreed because he was extorted, but everyone tells lies. Everyone is using value nature systems employed by the breaching method, left entrenched. It employed the reason our founders had to hide their actual roles and motivations, most critically, too. Motivations for the Constitutional Convention, for the Declaration of Independence, because the laws and the method set up was to measure and maintain. And new people who have to counter. It needed new people who have to be unity against the system. It already had this, and then employs reactions to that. You know, what kind of unity is it going to be? Fake database theater, motivations for it, leaving out the breaching method, a scientific value, black pupils too. Ugh. And right where the identity is extorted, and because your identity is greater than, and is more finite than, and it is active in relativity to yourselves, then as the ways you know, finite grouped and simultaneously. We are in a semi-ancient trap, but it is also the same one that was then colonial. Because this goes through names, this is a method the whole time everyone missed. How all members encounters to themselves as the members of the human volume science. It is about how we are sequence / simultaneous nature, and vice versa, true conversely / hyper conversely, the opposite sequence / simultaneous nature. Because in other words, where and how more hyper simultaneous nature is being made. Many pray, Boxy, two sounds here. Black people stray. So species body, everywhere we were, this huge difference. So we have the same color eyes, but we have different color eyes at the same time, black people. So because nature is demonstrating this too, it's a difference with how nature is showing us difference. These are things that are about constant or variable per its demonstrations, method of communications with us. Not with words, not with the language, but with one language, but with how. Even the languages will reveal the sounds were revealed with that better than I living identity of relationship to itself. For example, increasing value of the discernment of how that there is an identity of hyper simultaneous that reveals humanity with quality aspects in nature that is distinct from, but is also non-distinct from the other species bodies of volume, even the birds, male, female, even though they have eggs, ages, areas, difference, nature as its own identity, as the hyper simultaneous. It appreciates words like nature, value, as the hyper native. But in other words, as systems individually grouped and together, they have been tactical ulterior from its own. It's one thing to speak for and about money. And well, it's my job, I have to speak about every day. But our founders left us exception nature. And so we have two at last that game. Not found, in other words, real evolution science /S only feels like game /S and or else we sense. And when we sense, that's just another means to show better actual evolution means out of nowhere. Especially where and how, especially in many ways, especially different where we are quality as fact, cheap nature. And so we have to appreciate the quality of criminal insidiousness nature that nature demonstrates per nature's definition of criminal insidiousness, of how to demonstrate uses of grouping, not like a criminal enterprise. But then as but like it too, but greater in ways greater than more fun, not like a terrorist group, not like countries as archetypal criminal enterprises. There's a hyper archetypal criminal enterprise present, and or its method, and still people being the peak sophistication of the law, being and having been shown to speak for it as predicate acts with facts roles, way worse than they put little kids in prison for. I mean, they put adults in prison for their own kids too. And those are increasingly the families that have been used remotely. Certain type of victim slash hyper victim. While this has been sustained since some ancient times, and people speak about value and speak about the law and premises that where they're only capable, where they're jumping into on dishonestly at locations to use remotely to exploit that phenomenon. Where, like for example, a judge Napolitano has judging freedom. I want to put too many videos. I try to get him to follow mandated law. It's supposed to be mandated law. You're supposed to be able to simply say where you caught when you find people abusing kids and elderly at the same time, let alone as people involved with the World Trade Center attack, interstates who timed roles with it, and as people next to campuses that are connected. People with the name Cololo and DeMoro said that they have a cousin. They have cousins. They're cousins with people named Scalora, and they have roles with the intelligence community intercities, with private schools and public schools. Where at different schools they're putting fake things in the database at the same time as collusions with predicate acts with facts. Now it's these are people involved with New York City schools from that are involved with Connecticut schools. I call them with the principal child abuser. They're also involved with overt criminal enterprises, various natures of federal criminals before they got caught, and increasingly people involved with conversations and ties to all kinds of natures of ties to people named Gold, former and other former mayors, also involved on with names on off the state education building and locations next to it, with names also involved with overt criminal enterprises, and with all sides in the World Trade Center attack, and with remote uses of the sensibility of a mass amount of identities of experts who are only good at and are trained to just push things and change what people say per their roles with readings of statutes, all kinds of ways, criminally foreign influence, as they have been shown to do, as victims A through Z. This is overt, all sides in criminal and civil cases, their lawyers, the interbranch switching and forging names and putting fake sequences as collusions with the people at crime scenes and their sources at the same time. That's how long people have been faking things and needing to keep things, the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, blamed on other things, others ourselves. To where too that theater integrity that pretends it could speak for justice, that pretends it could speak for their sciences each, that's their difference. No one has spoken for women until they see what New York City is. The suburbs were designed for the tortures, extortion, and slavery methods, plural, against each one of them individually, grouped in together. And there were these three identities of our founders. The third as Native Americans, as one third as the the white crackers who had to counter extort the other ones, who were also enslaved, tortured, and extorted. And then because the laws were against the countries grouped too. Just like you could extort an individual, you could extort these suits and ties. It raised them from schools that measures and maintains the other communicated for our founders. Then they communicated for us to have communicated for themselves. Those not as as when they were here. Those as James Madison. That behind Constitution unabridged. That behind rights that are too innumerable for us to list as one of the amendments. I believe it was the Ninth Amendment per Judge Napolitano. I forgot which amendment he said it was. All we have to know is Marbury versus Madison. But they even have the definitions of that. They pretend things that are debatable that are not, like their collusion /s, and or the difference of that and the people roles with the corrections involved with them. People on off the state corrections offices have military roles. Also, with the judges and prosecutors on off the boxing gyms and other gyms, with people associated with former director of the FBI in Washington, that increasingly have roles planting evidences on and faked, roles with predicate acts with facts methods and uses of nature. Method /s. Slavery, for example, was about a breaching method entrenched in America before it was America and before our founders were born, sickly distinctly north and sickly distinctly south. It had countries individually grouped in together as names collusions and with their differences and keeping blamed on other things, others ourselves, their roles, even the ones that were real, to hide the breaching method. For example, has a scientific value that peers right through black pupils. Peer! Black pupils here. Predicate acts with facts methods is one of the things that slavery was about. That's one of the things witch trials were about, even if they were made up. So Wethersfield, Connecticut was the last of 13 counter-extorted positions forced to defend themselves by becoming a country that would have to stay abridged while it would have to try to get unabridged. But the breaching method measured and maintained that self-valued by people A through Z. Interpreted the way the breaching method wanted and needs it interpreted. And now we not only need to do that, there are 3 identities of time that have to be appreciated properly to appreciate what actually was as itself. As the value of sequence true first. And so then the third portion of our founders are the portion the portion that had to counter the extort the other founders who were not Native American. Already, since semi-ancient times, names A through Z, uses of sciences names A through Z, use tactical ulterior from nature's employment /s of them, where nature is also positive unto itself, in valuing a special difference as itself, where and how itself distinctly values, but also non-distinctly. And we could value, in other words, we could stay systems other than its own, but will force space nature transfer. See, that's self-value now because we have been countries A through Z. Value nature systems used also grouped remotely, not even aware of the method to adaptation. So even if a group of all the majority of countries you guys make subject treatment, you leave out exception nature because you've been faking it. If you look what's really recorded, see, forgiveness is about the collusions with the breaching method and a whole bunch of foreign names. And then they lie about what they think when we respond. I don't even know her name. Jennifer Social. I don't know her name before that. And Jim Social. I don't know them. Right before that, there was a fake exception pretending to know me and tying to me to fake ties to other people with one of the Spada sisters. The Spada sisters made a confession tied to that girl, and then a Ray Reynolds and a Eric Jensen did, and they were recorded involved with the FBI director. I didn't know that yet, but also with with other countries, and with overt criminal enterprises, and with private ones, and with people telling on people with fake things and things that they do, and back behind them when no one's looking, and with private school kids coming into the classrooms to do it. And doing things so when people go back and speak of time, they pretend they're lying and they're getting away with it. In other words, they're lying about the motivations why we're using their names. That's because the interbranch won't get onto paper. A whole bunch of people that work for the Britain Superior Court and for Hartford courts have roles with the Wethersfield Police forging and switching names. Also with state police families and these are names with a whole bunch of people that work for Hartford Hospital and Whiting Forensics are involved with houses in the intelligence community families that used to live here. And they got involved with untimely deaths and timed planting evidences. It's also there are proofs that the people with the faked writing have roles with intelligence families associated with a music store, associated with a striker, a Joshua Striker, and people in Rocky Hill associated with a Jonathan Maiano, and people with the name Spada, involved with the name Cololo, with confessions of police switching and forging names and pretending other with little tricks and stacking names. They also are involved with people that pretend that I had conversations with them and that I said everyone's evil. And these are people sequence shifting as people that were involved recorded having abused my father right before he died in the hospital, and with people who are involved with organized crime, um, you know, acts against him and me and others in cases, prove it. In other words, and then they're pretending they had conversations with me as people that work at the hospital who have ties to the houses involved with the Wethersfield police with wire crimes. They're hiding behind their roles with Afghans too, kids and adults through time. These are people involved with all kinds of medical corruption with a whole bunch of countries, like involved with psychiatry and badges at the same time, and nuclear weapons, guns, let alone nuclear weapons. So, A through Z. So we can make hyper positives out of negatives. So this breaching method showed them and built only known how to make criminal and citizen natures of positives out of negatives. This is how that breaching method works as a method slash S. And you guys maintain self value, the nature of it. And that maintains blamed on other things, others, or selves. All it needs to be to keep power. What no one wants. All exception nature, too. A demonstration, same thing. It's not what makes anyone successful or anything like that. And if the nature of industries change, and then we have no industry. If it changes to make everyone free, it's going to do it in a way that's language and nature that's aware of that too. The suburbs were designed before our founders were born, designed for torture, extortion, slavery, designed in order to have the nature of the debate. without denied, effectively used to maintain, measured and maintained. What can't defend its logic and nature, like, for example, pretending science spoke or the motivations for it, and have discerned. Well, we have this black pupils, whites of eyes, same color eyes, different color eyes, same time to discern with. How that there's a distinct identity of hyper simultaneous that shows us how the species have this distinctly, non distinctly, and simultaneously. So we turn this into a gaming system slash hyper gaming system that is hyper transparent. So it has to stay real. It has to stay increasingly positive. And or it has to show us revelations about why, how it can't really. And it has to enable, and we'll sense it if it doesn't enable it. You know, all the ways that people that aren't even from New York City want to help. But the only ones allowed to help first are people inclusions with those people who will jump into conversations, like the people involved with digital crimes, with the FBI and other agencies, who are also involved with the World Trade Center, with natures of trade and industry that can't be entertained in the Constitution, unabridged, defended. The value of that. That can't be a nature. That is an A. This with countries A through Z. You have predicate acts with facts rules when you were little kids, whether you're Native American or not. If you don't appreciate it that way, because in other words, that's if anyone was honest, Native Americans were fighting with Native Americans, but some of those Native Americans were in agreement with our founders. There are proofs that maybe they were one with Madison's plan, because C president slash chief and C species individual group difference slash S and species body of volume, that with the hyper simultaneous, demonstrating that we didn't invent this and the other species volumes didn't invent these things. This demonstration slash S. I tell it best, many ways, boxing. I don't leave out the ways other people could tell the best. I don't compare. There's a point here. There's a pattern of predicate acts. For example, relative to people who brickhead 10 when people, I shouldn't have said pattern. I said there's a whole bunch of proofs and confessions, and there's a timeline. And there's what's greater than and more finite than the timeline. And there's active relativity to it with the World Trade Center. And since to hide that, Hartford courts have roles with a house across the street from a school at the corner of New Park Avenue and Park Street in Hartford, Connecticut. And they have roles with Daryl Sullivan at Alina's Pizza there. And they have roles with intercultural and difference is real and made up, involved with foreign and domestic military, all sides with the World Trade Center attack, and with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, in that context and sense. And they have Emily or Amy involved with courts that switch names and forge names and switch sequences. In the Ninth Circuit Court, next to the World Trade Center towers right before the attack, they had post-dated documents inside the Ninth Circuit Court that was proven after the World Trade Center attack. Names and the sources of all sides of it are involved with a pattern of predicate acts against me and wrongdoing against me. Intercities and interstates having been coordinated, also as people who had criminally foreign influence roles with conversations with their teachers, some of them as intelligence community with Weathersfield campuses and with Rocky Hill campuses through time, and with people with all sides in criminal and civil cases of elections, with uses of difference. They have uses of words and dictates to respond to negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures For example, like misinformation, as sequence shifts, cover ups. How many sequence shifts they already covered up? They have the So in other words, you have to follow mandated law and stay on the predicate acts. WFSB attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others about the World Trade Center. And they attached me as and other kids through time, and as an adult too, with the people as an adult attached me to fake. They run into the mental health places and hide life progressions after they force people to yell, or all kinds of exceptions. They do the opposite things too, so people can't describe things. There are people who have been stacking a whole bunch of people at Hartford Hospital involved with the Leahy family and a Lombardo family and people with the name Dylan and Sioka, tied to a Sioka, pretended they had conversations with me and knew me. I never saw Sioka there, but she's also involved with people involved with the other campuses I went to and with names next to them who also speak things and then pretend others responded or had conversations with them, who they run in. And there are also role planting evidences on off crime scenes and campuses, natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders that each individual has to speak for per the law. But they prevent this. This is a trick. This is a part of the roles where we're gonna show fake legal with legal voices and natures. We're going to show the predicate acts with facts that we don't have to be lawyers to discern black pupils. We're going to show them whites of eyes. This is not about what color of. This is about American in a breaching method trap that can't be entertained and afforded. Told about how the suburbs were designed for torture, extortion, slavery, let alone the city, and know how all that time there have not been New Yorkers. There's not been New Yorkers. There have not been New Yorkers like on tubes and things like that. Meanwhile, they're stacked in buildings right next to a river. Everything's denatured tactically. Why? How we get on the river? Because it was a slavery method against our founders, a torture method against them, sickly distinctly against everyone, sickly not distinctly. It's functional. Where how you guys blame on other things, others yourselves, what it caused, the breaching method, for example. And we could discern it maintains other things, others ourselves. Blame for what that is still causing. It's still functional. Where and how formal identities of the sciences communicate other, for example, than what our founders communicated. It's what Marbury versus Madison, I was taught, means real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice. Black pupils. Here, we've not seen that yet here. In other words, we have not seen the final game slash S. Boxing's ancient gaming system must be revived. In other words, if we're all working together as a species, volume, our country's leaders' names, no matter who it is, they're going to agree. Otherwise, their names are needed by our own countries. No other countries need their leaders' names used for premises. You guys had other than sciences premises used for premises. And that's some part of the illusions that helped to get away with it. Because I also studied how it was gotten away with. How not one person has brought formal juxtaposition, the inseparability of how nature is communicating with black and white. And the breaching method was and is too, with the fake difference. And the black and white to KKK with the black too. They're doing this to keep the places together they have together. Collusions with the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, with the foreign and domestic military on off Central Connecticut State University, Get them onto paper with these cops switching names, forging names, putting falsified police part, lying to judges, and with some of them with them too. These are many falsified police parts interstate, intercity through time. I can't get them on, but then they put while they're preventing writing since I'm a kid. The courts are also the ones confessing that they have people like Cololo and Demoro involved with them with foreign and domestic families and people with the name Mayano involved next to campuses like Hartford Hospital. He's one of the families with houses next to Hartford Hospital and businesses next to Hartford Hospital, involved with drugs and medicines crimes with kids, with the people who counter such, and has their roles with the military, with a whole bunch of different countries, and their roles with sequence shifts, and identity theft, fraud, slanders, and fake motivations to screen for others to use too to screen the real roles with the foreign here and there. Our sides are breached. You guys, again, you have not communicated for our founders honestly because this. You've been fake difference. You guys a little in other words, even the beginnings of the Quran and of the Old Testament, you read them to keep fake sides as collusions, tactically delusions raw. You want to keep other people, others ourselves, blamed for the real causes of chaos with the capital with groupthink, as a phrase used by Donald Rumsfeld as reported by CNN or Fox News. Fox News and CNN and MSNBC have sources that are certain types of victim slash hyper victim, as attorneys, even attorney generals. And we have military police forms, foreign and domestic, tactically delusions raw. Till England doesn't even remember the history of English. We're in a semi-ancient trap that measured and maintained other things, others ourselves, blamed for what itself caused. A hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, if you will. And as a species, we could then proceed with the ACE Act, the Anti-Hyper-Archetypal Criminal Enterprise Act, and the ancient gaming system that comes with pantheism, and we could make a temporary slash lasting security, defense, stability slash hyperstability. There's a difference between stability as defined by roles with the suits and ties, counters, and exceptions still as collusion, still tactically delusions raw together. Again, look at the readings of the beginning of the Old Testament in the Quran. You can't afford to. And you guys can't afford to have discerned how nature itself shows functional is where and how and why. If someone's description of their own emotions or of other people's emotions is only to leave out or to facilitate other than hypernative systems. In other words, you guys allow truths for used for lies because you had, when you were young, means to discern. You didn't want that against the Native Americans. You didn't want that against the colonists. There was something sickly distinctly against the colonists and against the Native Americans. And if you pay attention, it's sickly distinctly against the king. How many people are relying? How many people have asked the presidents, let alone Trump? How many people are going to ask Trump or did ask Trump to play golf with him? Imagine. There's a certain, in other words, if you're over locations there, now even if you become the most powerful leader in the world of groups, a group of nations, they want to blame America In other words, where that's right and wrong, there are other, in other words, because we never have possession of our names. We have suits and ties. All these countries are shared with our campuses together, using those names and write the names right next to the locations increasingly manifest. We're consolidated our illusions for where there are rights to lie in natures of police forms, in natures of roles, with state positions, with streets, and with appearances, black pupils. This breaching method knew it would need more than excuses of its own. No, no, it invested everyone to leaving out. Our founders communicated not to leave out about how the employments were worthless, but they had to entertain the value nature system still entrenched. They had to force 13 colonies that weren't connected inside of even more colonies to become a plan to become the Constitution unabridged, which is critical slash hypercritical. Because in other words, we have to address what was entrenched here more finite, greater than what our founders were capable of countering. And again, we have all three of our natures of our founders together. They still were incapable of countering it. All except exception nature, we're still being forced to entertain that are in demonstration of the same thing. We're still being forced to entertain cheap tricks, roles, like with subject treatments. Well, let's move on to the border. Notice how people have problems with borders in all these countries that have nuclear weapons and needs to have armies and people walk around training. But we're still the suburbs were designed before our founders were born. And they're lucky if they had a wagon. You know, it is more probable, it is more practical to theorize, let alone to convict, that Native Americans had great libraries and they had been wiped out. And they were one of the reasons that one of the only perennial vegetables left is asparagus. It's very hard to kill and it lives a long time. That proves that they tactically denatured Earth to force, trick, hurt, and persuade. This which has people A through Z walk into the stores, go buy some plastic water bottle with a suit and tie on, with some clothes that you don't even like on, with no clothes on. Vaccine. That's just it. In other words, how this is motivated, rolls with this, is how they get away with. And this is also, in other words, we have to observe the breaching method. How we could observe the breaching method is how we could observe collusions with all sides of criminal and civil cases, their lawyers, the legal names, including the judges and prosecutors, and the exceptions tied, even including their state offices, like the state judicial branch offices, like the state corrections offices, like their campuses, like the places they grew up and went and talked about and tied to, increasingly from other locations. Everyone is being and has been used remotely is one of the answers. Where and how this has been left out, these revelations, this hyperscope black pupils to know fake science stands. So who understands? Somebody who hears. So the intelligence community jumps into posts on social media and lies about their motivations. That's weird how they confess things too. They're leaking things. They have roles with the Los Solitos and with other natures of Latin gangs and Italian criminal enterprises per themselves, as ones with judges and prosecutors planting evidences on and off campuses with them. Identity thefts and frauds, fake conversations with little kids as doctors, fake conversations with adults and their family members. Everyone attached to fake conversations with themselves and with others. Does anybody here? The only reason you guys don't is because, in other words, from off all locations is the nature of this collusion slash S. And this is manifest with your styles of logic, your nature of logic. So if someone get FSB, communicate with them. I have a phone. I communicate with them. They don't, they're hiding it, and they're obfuscating it and switching it and spreading with their mouths lies about it. Their motivations, planting it World Trade Center predicate acts, roles with Sandy Hook and with victims and victims advocates are increasingly involved with crime scenes. This is how the courts and this breaching method you measured and maintained certain types of victim slash hyper victim that would speak for the law. Exactly the way the breaching method needed them to. As collusions with predicate acts with facts method slash S. So there's a subjugario. In other words, you guys make me use names. They have their kids involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, a whole bunch of different countries. A whole bunch of people next to Central Connecticut State University, on my street in Weathersfield, who were planting evidences there. They have roles with shipping locations. Weathersfield police have wire crimes with them. All kind of falsified police reports with them. Roles with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases with them. With the court switching names, putting fake things in databases too. Their family members involved. So it's necessary to get them on paper because these are ones involved. There's a Fred Gruzet, who's one of the ones with New York City, involved with people on Facebook with the intelligence community. Like a Nick Sweet is one of the ones on Facebook involved with Weathersfield Police and with a Fred Gruzet. Planting evidences, child abuses, identity theft, fraud, slanders, timed collusion with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. They're not legitimately with those things. In other words, and that's with Tim O'Brien and Andrew O'Brien, people with different police departments, still Hartford and Weatherfield, Rocky Hill, and that has something to do with the roles all along Route 3. And a Whiting forensics said there's the name Christine. They kept asking me Christine. They didn't give a whole name. What the hell? Well, they keep so there's more than one Christine anyway involved with Whiting forensics since I was a kid. They have roles with various natures of federal criminals before they were caught and forcing them not to be caught and forcing them to hide things in other cases, etc. They've been planting collusions because in other words, all sides, because everyone's being used remotely. You guys don't know how to think because that's why you can't follow mandated law. That's why you have criminally foreign influence denials of that and uses of that remotely. In other words, roles. Black pupils, we're gonna discern this, and we're gonna voice this formally, simultaneously. These are crimes against the people of New York City. These are people that led up to world wars. These are not legitimate logistical responses, non-responses to the insane countries A through Z. Otherwise they change or fake what you say and adapt through other natures of apparent motivations, natures, needs, interests, and additional names too, because they're leaving out the hyper group. Some wear suits and ties, some don't. Some counter that too. You know what I mean? But they're the same quality aspects, fact, human nature, leaving out this hyperscope, black pupil, leaving out the predicate acts with fact method clearer than day upon the people of New York City, let alone little boys and girls, let alone the men and women who are already little boys and girls in that little people stacking. No, in other words, people stacking in those little traps, all people stacked. Oh, it's equal. Equal where? There in the tax. In other words, all syntax trap, name trap. In other words, and it's exploited other than there's a fake theater called criminal insidiousness. I'm not even a lawyer that speaks, pretends it can speak for the law. This preaching method knew that would speak in our country's A through Z before our founders were even born. Vaccine. In other words, so my name is Anthony Wall. People next to the World Trade Center and in the court next to it, they have been planting sequence shifts and evidences in cases through time, as time collusions with a whole bunch of other countries, as the names evolve and the locations evolve, uses of corners of streets, uses of that design of the suburbs, a little bit too narrow, a little bit unsafe where it doesn't have to be, a little bit, it's designed for torture, extortion, slavery, and or the nature of the debate of it to be used to sense and maintain self-valid roles, not for that discern, because wouldn't those roles wouldn't be once we get education liberated. It gets liberated at countries A through Z. They self-validate the science is abridged. Certain type of victim slash hyper victim from off all locations. Then further on off them with hyper additional motivations, nature's needs, interest apparent. The breaching method stays and has stayed. Hyper sophistication that uses and has used remotely all descriptions of names and of all of instances at all locations slash s. Everywhere the human species volume stands. That's one of the things too, hyper additionally. The hyperscope can see and can discern black pupils. Yeah, there's time, it is here. The predicate acts with facts method, we see it clear. And so, in other words, we need to make we have to address wherever one of the reasons they say we can only help we can only be positive for Israel is because they have roles with nuclear weapons and needs to cool nuclear things. Where countries A through Z are equally criminal insidiousness natures used remotely already. Hyper criminally foreign influence and tactically delusions raw too. Because you guys came through others camp. In other words, supposed to understand how George how James Madison got George Washington to agree to begin to counter extort themselves, even though they couldn't get unentrenched the method to the fact human nature slavery enslavement of themselves. That's slavery. To want to go to be to even a leader, let alone be a leader of a country inside of where there's no country. You have to counter extort people at 13 locations, and thank God that the laws were so crazy against everyone. If you do that for a little bit of time, now they have no choice but to value any kind of unity or help to defend themselves from countries individually grouped in together, from the companies with them, from the names with them, the differences with them, and was fluent through that and fluent through it grouped. So, in other words, please follow mandated law so we can get to how those other countries who are here and there share roles with things that are manifest, like on off hospitals. They have roles with psychiatry, all kinds of scams under the guise of healthcare, where that has nothing to do with and mental illness. So they have assigned the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures on others. Other things are solved, and they're increasingly putting fabricated transcripts into databases. Increasingly, people had roles with home break-ins when I was in middle school, and overt criminal enterprises and private ones, as names involved with the intelligence community like Heather Hansen on Church Street in Old Weathersfield. I never met a Bruce Hansen and his wife. I think at one time I walked by them. I didn't even know if that, they're involved with the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and people enter campuses like Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, and people all along Route 175 to there, from the founding locations in Weathersfield, Connecticut, involved with people from my grammar school, from other schools, though, who pretended fake things in databases with a Joe DeMauro and a mayor, Gold, and his kids and family and neighbors, and and others with a Brian, with named O'Brien, and tied to people named Dace and as D. Simone, involved with the intelligence community, foreign and domestic, with medical corruption, and with all kinds of natures of organized crime, originally still juxtaposed to keep them countering what they are way worse collusions with and as, to keep them hiding where and how. The breaching method uses them remotely. People A through Z, including the differences of the branches of government, with a also in other words, this is clearer than day, black pupils. It is time. All we have to do is force mandated law. As he when he worked for Fox News, the Facebook page of Judge Napolitano was used by the intelligence community, self-valued, being used remotely, though self-valued, in ways they don't understand completely. But in other words, his Facebook page too, and the Facebook page of the principal child offender, and the Weathersfield police have more involved with it. They have people with the name intelligence community. They have their religious spots also involved with it. Increasingly, people involved with the whiting forensics involved with it. All along Route 175 are names that take pictures next to people with the intelligence community involved with KKK black themed leaking to that way. Because then while they're pretending to know people, these are the courts, judges, and prosecutors and their family members who have timed roles with a whole bunch of different countries next to Trinity College and CCSU, with people associated with Weathersfield Pizza too, and names associated with and as names associated with the state judicial branch offices, who also have uses of conversations about a field next to my house and playing football, and they have ties to a guy with a what red pickup truck involved with the state judicial branch officers planting evidences. Further, were involved with the child defenders with the kids, the FBI, and one with the name Ian. Further involved with more obscure pictures with the kids and with their neighbors involved too, on all sides of my house through time, with the past neighbors involved with some untimely deaths on Trinity College, and with the people involved with the wire crimes of the Weathersfield police. And they're lying about the motivations. They bring up names like that to screen their roles with the foreign, the other agencies and police involved with the Weathersfield police who've been faking conversations with me with them. So you can't go to that place because they already faked the conversations with me as a kid, now as an adult. So you can't trust the FBI too. They have rules of wire crime acts and methods and digital crimes with digital sex offenders too, even leaders of kids. More obscure pictures involved and other natures of pictures of the kids. And if you talk about such things, or even if you counter parts of it, you, in other words, they'll hurt you for it because they have they have roles with what is manifest and how it is manifest that they can't and didn't can't discern because relative to how they're already being having been used remotely before they took oaths, they had roles of predicate acts with facts. We have since before we are out of grammar school, we have means to discern. We wanted nothing. There was a breaching method sickly distinctly against Native Americans, sickly distinctly against the colonists, and sickly distinctly against the American citizens since then, and presidents, and sickly distinctly against ourselves. We have these suburbs still manifest this way too, sickly distinctly from the cities, sickly distinctly from Hartford, Connecticut, which is a suburban slash urban, which is also involved with the syntactical phenomena and criminal foreign influence, factory nature, quality aspects of nature as a certain type of hyper victim. Mark Twain and Harry Beecher Stowe and their houses and the location being and having been used since founding relative to this method that employed denials of and worse, black pupils, whites of eyes. The predicate acts with facts method. You don't leave this out from subjects each. Someone must teach. In other words. So, like Joe Rogan, or not Joe Rogan, what's his name? Alex Jones is not for Donald Trump. In other words, and he's not for the Sandy Hook people. And the Sandy Hook people aren't for the other people at the campuses. No one's. They have people. In other words, they need to get on paper with the rest of the people with the Sandy Hook campuses, so I can get their names. The rest of the ones involved. See, we have identities of experts who have state collusions with uses of location slash S, including especially differentially ones with databases. See, this breaching method used databases before our founders were born, tied to names A through Z. This is the identity theft, fraud, slander method we're going to address as the extortion method slash S against our founders, individually grouped in together that way. There's more than one method against them at the same time. It's multi-front while it's singular. While it's a singular method to keep blamed on other things, others ourselves, because it is a trinity where and how it is manifest by nature's demonstration of it. Because nature is demonstrating to us to this. Use of the breaching method. Use of the breaching method in self-value roles, keeping the causes of it. The causes of the people who rolls with it too, blamed on other things other than themselves. How could you even still ask what slavery is about? How could that not be clear as day? It's about a breaching method. It designed the suburbs. What are the cities? Unacceptable. Except for one word, we could change everything. In other words, space means come out of nowhere. Temporary means own them and things like that. The whole, we can take temporary positions and make lasting value progression better than perfect. Evolution's fruits and means given from nowhere. New York City cries in painful tears. And we have not been free at last. Begin the class that sings. It teaches things. So boxing's for circle. Boxing's to gain shape. Okay, thank you. Boxing's next scheme.